As promised in my review of SummerSlam 2015, this video right here is going to be about the more specific topic of the Divas revolution that is currently going on in the WWE and why I think it's not working. Those of you who watched Raw last week saw the 6-woman tag between Team Bella and Team PCB get utterly annihilated by the crowd. They chanted everything under the sun that they could possibly imagine except for the 6 girls in the match. And to me, what happened on Raw this week is kind of been building for the last few weeks. This was kind of the culmination of a hole that WWE kind of dug for themselves, because you saw it last week, the week before. On the previous episode of Raw, they started chanting for Brock Lesnar during the Sasha-Nikki Bella match. So it seemed like, interest in this Divas Revolution started off very hot when they brought in the NXT girls. They brought in Charlotte, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks all on the same night, all in the same segment, and that got a huge response. And since then, interest in this Divas Revolution has just dwindled more and more and more until you get what you saw on Raw last week. And now it's time to kind of analyze why that happened, whose fault it is, and what's really going on here. And, it's really, again, taking what happened on Raw last week and comparing it to how the NXT crowd reacted to something like Bayley versus Sasha 2 nights earlier, where that match was treated like it was a main event. It was billed as a main event, and the crowd treated it like it was a main event. It was in the same building. So I imagine a lot of the same fans were probably at both Raw and NXT. So where's the divide there? Like, what caused that? Is there some kind of a divide between, like, the main roster WWE fans and the NXT fans, and the main roster fans just don't like women's wrestling? Is it I don't know, some large-scale national sexism going on among wrestling fans across the United States? Is it, what exactly is going on here? Because intrigue in women's wrestling in the WWE has been minimal at best for years now, a long, long time. You'd have to go back to the days of, like, Trish Stratus and Lita to see any kind of interest in women's wrestling. And even then, people look back on, like, the Lita and Trish Stratus days with rose-colored glasses. Even then, the girls were very rarely given much to do. It was very rare when they'd be allowed to do anything that special. They played a bigger part of the show. Normally you'd have Lita and Trish working with the men and doing angles with them. So they felt like big stars, and they could have great matches every once in a while, but they weren't always given that, and weren't always given those big storylines. So even back in those days that people look back on women's wrestling, there wasn't a whole lot of intrigue there. There wasn't a high demand for it from the fans, and the WWE wasn't interested in really giving them that much to do anyway. It wasn't until recently, like, you started seeing things like Give Divas a Chance, that whole hashtag movement, and NXT, their Divas division, really got this huge swelling up of support from the WWE fans. So that really jump-started kind of this interest in giving, like, women's wrestling a major chance on the main roster. And of course Ronda Rousey has something to do with that as well. Her recent stardom. I mean, they reference her all the time whenever they talk about the Divas division, but which, to be honest, is kind of annoying, because it's like, oh, hey, look, Ronda Rousey's great, and she is. I'm not saying she's not, but it's like the WWE constantly talks about how great she is, and it's like, and we got girls too. Isn't that awesome? It's, they keep referencing Ronda Rousey without so much, and this is where I'll get into where the main problems are, but they keep referencing Ronda Rousey without offering, like, an equivalent on their side of the equation. They just kind of say, hey, we got women too, and they're like super duper important. Trust us. But in any case, so why is the Divas Revolution going on right now? Why is it not working? And why did the crowd react the way they did on Raw? And what exactly is going on? And how can the Divas division be so hot in NXT and be kind of just cold on the main roster show? And really, what it comes down to, it's not the girls, it's not the talent. There are varying degrees of ability among the 9 girls that are being showcased right now. People rag on the Bellas, especially on the internet. There's a lot of criticism thrown their way. I'm going to argue that their ability or lack thereof is a completely different debate for another time. Really immaterial to what happened on Raw this week, at least in my opinion. I will sing the praises of Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha Banks, especially Sasha, all day long. I've been following them on NXT. I think they're fantastic. I think they're outstanding. And, in the last NXT special, I thought Sasha and Bayley had one of the best matches I've seen in a long time. It was a wonderful, beautiful match. So I don't blame any of them. And you got Paige, who's always been, I'll elaborate more on Paige in a little bit, but you have Paige and Alicia Fox and Tamina and Naomi and those girls, and again, varying degrees of talents and intrigue there, but really none of that. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like the talents are completely blameless whenever anything goes wrong. I don't want to convey that, but what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter if all 9 of these girls were extremely super talented or if they all sucked. It doesn't matter. They were put into a situation that nobody could make work. And that's really my main point here, is that the creative behind the Divas division and this Divas revolution or whatever, it's non-existent. And the reason the crowds and the fans, and by the way, it's not the fans' fault either, because you can't force them to like something. We can, get mad at them for showing just complete apathy towards women, but if they don't like it, they don't like it. I mean, you can't force that. But anyway, the reason that they're reacting with apathy towards this is because they have not been given a reason by creative to truly invest and care in this resurgence of the Divas division. There is no reason to invest in what's going on. There's not much in the way of storyline or character development. The matches themselves don't matter and have no consequences on the storyline. That's been firmly established in the month that this has been going on. So really, it's all talk and no substance. And that's basically that basically sums up the Divas division. I think WWE Creative, the main roster, they took a look at NXT and what the girls are doing over there. Because there's been a lot of buzz surrounding the Divas division over in NXT. And I think they took a look at that buzz and they looked at the matches from the TakeOver specials and thought, hey, if we just have the girls work longer matches and we take these NXT talents that have some buzz and we interject them into the main show, that'll fix everything and we'll have a Divas division that the fans care about and it'll be great and wonderful. The problem is that they didn't craft a storyline to really make it work. I think that their ultimate goal and ambition is to make women's wrestling relevant and to make it a major part of the show. And that's a worthwhile goal. I think that's very ambitious and admirable to have that goal. The problem is that they didn't put in the work to really make the Divas Revolution work. And I always make comparisons to Star Wars because, those movies are great. So whenever I look at something related to storytelling, I often point to Star Wars, specifically the original trilogy, because that's where a lot of good examples can be used on how to build things and how to make stories work and such. And even the prequel trilogies I can use as a bad example for how to fuck up a story. So Star Wars, it provides everything. It's wonderful. But if you look at what George Lucas wanted to do with the original Star Wars, the very first one, he wanted to create a sci-fi epic, sci-fi fantasy epic, I should say, that was a callback to the old serials like Flash Gordon. And he wanted to do it on a grand stage, and he wanted to invent all these new filmmaking techniques and do all these stuff to just create the ultimate sci-fi fantasy epic and to change the way movies are done forever, among his other goals of wanting independence from the studio system and other things like that. Very ambitious, but worthwhile goal if you do it right. but that's the key. You can have lightsabers, you can have all the big special effects, you can have so many of those other things, but if you don't have the characters in the story, if you don't have that journey that make us want to watch the rest of this movie, it's not going to work. And I think you saw that in because once Star Wars became popular, all the fucking rip-offs came out, and the rip-offs are nowhere near as good because the stories and the characters suck, and that's really the number one problem. Also, the fact that it's obviously a rip-off of Star Wars, but you look at Star Wars, and they had that goal, and Lucas had this very ambitious and admirable goal, but he had to have characters and he had to have story. He had to have a main conflict, which was the Rebel Alliance trying to take down the Death Star. And then from there, everything kind of spider webs down. It's like, all right, we have this farm boy Luke, and he craves adventure. So, all right, what adventure would he be craving? All right, main conflict. So Luke has got to tie into that main conflict to achieve his ultimate goal. All right, how does Luke do that? Well, Princess Leia has to take the Death Star plans, and she has to get the message to the planet down below, which is on Tatooine. All right, so how does she get the message? She sends C-3PO and R2-D2. Okay, and they're carrying the Death Star plans, and they eventually meet up with Luke, but they're trying to get to Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's the message is intended for. So they run into Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan Kenobi tells him about the Force and his father and all of that. And it's like, all right, so they're going to take the droids, and they're going to take them over to Alderaan, and then save the rebellion, but they need a ship, so that's where they meet Han Solo and his co-pilot Chewbacca, and then all of that, and all the characters just fall into place right there, and all the characters interact with each other, and they have different relationships and different goals and different wants and desires and all of this other stuff, and they form bonds and relationships with each other, and it's fun to watch them bounce off of each other. So you have this main conflict, and you have all these characters that are tied into it, and they all interact differently with each other. They all have different wants, desires, personalities. No two characters are alike. Even the villains, like Grand Moff Tarkin, very different character from Darth Vader. And the backstory of Darth Vader was also provided, and how he ties into Obi-Wan. And not fully revealed how he ties into Luke yet, but there is that was also set up, and they did all this stuff with their characters and their story, and the original Star Wars film is just a great self-contained awesome first entry that establishes everything, and then it also leaves the door open to build on the universe and establish more in 5 and 6. Now, I'm not saying that WWE storylines have to be as intricate as Star Wars, but they have to tell their stories in a way that there has to be character, there has to be a main conflict, and there has to be payoff and all this other stuff and build up and stuff along the way. There is none of that going on in the Divas division. None at all. It's just a series of matches that all look the same, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses because none of it is building to anything, and the next week they just do the same thing. I mean, what is... You look at this Divas division and this Divas Revolution right now. What's the main conflict? I'm not entirely sure what the main conflict is. It has something to do with the Bellas being on top, and they want to dethrone... The other two teams want to dethrone them. How they do that is anybody's guess, because, you know, having tag matches every week where you may or may not win isn't exactly going to dethrone the Bellas, so I don't know what's going on there. Nikki has the title, so maybe the goal is to get the title off of Nikki, but they haven't really established any challengers for her yet. I mean, I know Night of Champions is coming up, so she's going to have to defend the belt, but they haven't really done much to establish any of the other girls as potential challengers, because, like I said, it's just an endless series of matches that never build anything. So who knows what's building into what, or who's moving where, or what. I don't even know. So it's just very poorly defined. Again, I get the basic idea that they want to dethrone the Bellas, but it's all very poorly defined, and not much has been established in the way of how Team PCB or Team Bad would accomplish the goal of dethroning the Bellas. It's not... again, none of it's very well established. Excuse me. Yeah, so that's a problem. And I've already referenced the matches, but if you look at the matches that they have every week, whether it be the 6-woman tag that was on last week's show, or Sasha versus Nikki from last week, or the Charlotte and Becky have been in countless tag matches. I feel like I've seen those two in tag matches like 6 times. In the short amount of time that the storyline's been going on. You see all these matches, none of them build to anything. And even like you look at the SummerSlam match, the 3-team tag, which could have been a really good match if any of the matches that built into it had any kind of significance to it. But again, it just feels like I'm seeing the same thing every single week. And the 3-way elimination tag, all right, Team PCB wins it, which you think, okay, is that going to give them the momentum to kind of like jump start this storyline and get going somewhere? Then the next night on Raw, during that disaster of a match, Team Bellas just win, so everything just evened out 50-50, so it didn't even really matter. So yeah, like I said, it really doesn't matter who wins or loses these matches. There's no context, there's no meaning. And without meaning and context, you have no reason to really invest in the matches, and if you have no reason to invest in the matches, then you get situations like what you saw on Raw last week with the crowd just vocally expressing their apathy. And that's a real problem. And like I said, I talked about characters. All right, who are these characters and what do they want? I know who Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha are, and I can give you a pretty good idea of who they are based on what I saw on NXT. But if you don't know who they are, if you don't watch NXT, and you just saw these 3 new girls pop up, you don't know anything about them yet. Aside, you know that Charlotte is Ric Flair's daughter, you know that Becky is Irish, and you know that Sasha is called the Boss for some reason. That's all you know. As far as there's nothing that really separates them from anybody else personality-wise. And there are all these questions that I have about these characters and what they're doing in the storyline. Do all the members of each team get along? If so, why or why not? If you know what I mean? Like, so everybody on Team PCB, they all get along. I mean, they all like each other. They just, Stephanie McMahon just said, "All right, you're a team now. Go forth and conquer," and that's it. And that's another thing. It's like, all right, so why are they teamed up? How did they wind up forming this alliance? Apparently, just because Stephanie said so. I would like to think that there'd be more of a reason than that, but it was literally like, all right, you're a team now. Go have fun. And, go make magic happen. And, was there a mutual agreement between Charlotte and Becky and Paige to form this alliance? Did Paige realize when none of the other divas would join her cause that she thought, all right, maybe I should go back to my roots, go back to my NXT stomping grounds and find some girls there that I formed bonds with and, potentially have friends down there, and maybe I could get some of those girls to come up and help me? Why is Sasha with Naomi and Tamina? Again, it's pretty much just because Stephanie said so. As someone who knows Sasha from NXT, I'm wondering why is Naomi the leader of this group? Shouldn't it be Sasha? I mean, because Sasha is such a nasty and commanding presence that I would feel like she would be the leader of the faction just based on the characters, not Naomi. It's like she would forcefully take over the faction, I would think. But again, it's like there's not these roles and these characters and their how they interact in their groups. It was not very well defined, and even I guess Alicia Fox is supposed to be like a suck up or a toady to the Bellas, but even that hasn't been that well established. There's chances to give these girls personality and character, and they haven't really done it. And just by the way they interact with each other, there are chances to do that, but as is, it's like they all just kind of smile and nod and all agree with each other and just go about their merry way. And that doesn't provide a whole lot of individuality among the personalities in these factions and makes them a lot less interesting. To me, Team PCB, those girls, I would not envision them being just happy-go-lucky, we're, BFFs type of faction. I would think of them as being kind of the groups that they compete with each other. And in trying to outdo each other, they bring out the best in each other, and that's how the team works. They thrive on competition, even if it's with each other. Team Bad, like I said, I just picture that, and I think Sasha just comes in and just forces Naomi to do whatever she tells her to do. And again, these are just ideas that I have in my head. And again, if the Divas title is the goal here, then how have the members of each team not faced each other at some point? Because, I mean, yeah, you're friends, and yeah, you're allies, and you're on the same team and everything, but this is a singles championship, and the number one contender has to be determined, theoretically, by girls moving up and down the rankings based on wins and losses. So you would think that at some point, members of the same team would cross paths and ultimately have to face each other to determine who moves up and ultimately gets the title shot. Not saying that has to turn into bitter rivalries or anything, although it can plant the seeds for such. Again, you're the ones writing this, and I'm just giving ideas. Eventually the members of the same teams you would think would have crossed paths by now, even. You look at the G1 Climax tournament, you saw Chaos versus Chaos. You saw Bullet Club versus Bullet Club. It didn't lead to any splits or anything, but eventually, in singles-based tournaments and competition, teammates are eventually going to cross paths. That's just how that works. So you would think that something like that would have happened in the Divas Revolution at this point, and it hasn't. It's just the endless cycle of very similar matches that keeps everybody, all the teams are all BFFs and everything, and nothing really changes or develops. It's, there's no end game. The matches don't matter. The characters are blank slates. I mean, looking at Team PCB again, I know that Charlotte and Becky are vastly different personalities, but as they've been presented, it's basically blonde Paige and redheaded Paige, and that's all there is. And that's kind of what I'm highlighting here when I say that there's not a whole lot of diversity in characters, and everybody just kind of looks and acts the same, and there's just not a whole lot of, they're not being given a whole lot of material by creative to really make this thing work. And there needed to be some kind of an end game, some kind of a main conflict, a goal for everybody to strive for. And the girls needed to have room to grow and develop as characters, and none of that has happened. First of all, there are other girls, aren't there? Because there were other divas that turned down Paige. I wouldn't know who they are. I'm just kind of like, I'm struggling to remember who everybody on the roster is at this point. But, there are other divas there that they could use, at least in squash matches, to make Charlotte look good, or make Becky look good, or Sasha, or Naomi, or anybody, so that you're not seeing the same members of these three teams face each other every single week. So that's another thing they could do, and utilize the other girls in ways to help establish the rankings. But another thing is that... I just lost my train of thought. Wait a minute. And so basically, I think I've covered just about everything. The writing just hasn't given them enough to really make this work. And again, it's fallen into a lot of the same traps that WWE falls into a lot, where, for Vince McMahon, who says in interviews, I don't like wrestling for wrestling's sake, he probably does it more than any other promoter in history, because so many of his matches just don't matter. Because you see all these matches every single week, and it's like, all right, if Team PCB wins, it doesn't matter, because they're just going to work with either Team Bella or Team Bad next week. So it really doesn't matter who wins these matches. Nobody moves up and down. The storylines... the matches don't develop the storyline. Nobody's being developed. Nobody's really unique or stands out or anything. It's just monotony. That's all it is. It's just this endless cycle of monotony. And after 4 or 5 weeks of that, they finally, they've been digging that hole for weeks. And even I've been asking, it's like, look, is this building to something? Is there a main purpose behind all of this? Because those questions haven't really been answered. And it eventually resulted in what you saw on last week's episode of Raw, which is unfortunate. I felt bad for the girls. I know the Miz TV segment that preceded the match was terrible and didn't do them any favors either, But again, I also feel like what happened on Raw was something that had been building for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's just when you're not given a reason to care, it's ultimately going to blow up in your face. You can have the best intentions, but if it doesn't, if you don't give the fans a reason to care, you can't just say, "Oh, look, we took these girls that have buzz and that the hardcore fans really like, and we're pushing them, and that'll fix everything." It's like, no, you got to put in a little bit more work than that. You can't just, if I'm making a movie, I can't just get a top name actor. It's like, all right, can't put effort into everything else. I don't have to. I got fucking Brad Pitt over here. I don't need to put effort into a script. Fuck that. It'll write itself because I got Brad Pitt. He's awesome, and it's not that easy. It's never that easy. You got to put forth the effort to really substantiate your stories and really make it matter. And a good way to highlight that is, again, looking at what WWE did with NXT and what the creative team has done with the NXT women. Look at the SummerSlam 9-woman elimination tag, and then look at Bayley and Sasha from the night before. What is the main difference between those two matches? The main difference is I had a reason to care about the NXT match because it had been built up for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and we got our big payoff. And if you look at the build-up of that match, Bayley's road to the championship, if you will. First of all, you had Sasha, who was the champion, and she had beaten everybody and was just the unstoppable force and was just the ultimate nasty antagonist for the story. I mean, she was just a very talented, won all the time, was also a bit of a nasty bitch. So it just kind of like, all right, you got your antagonist. That's great. Then you have Bayley on the other side. Had her championship matches in the past, could never get it done for whatever reason. It just never worked out. She would always come up on the losing end. She gets injured in a match with Emma. I don't think it was Emma. It was either Emma or Dana Brooke. I don't remember. Gets injured, comes back, and starts taking things very seriously and is like, all right, I'm going to start beating the best women in NXT to ultimately build myself up to the title. So every match that Bayley has on the road to the TakeOver special matters because she's building herself up to the championship. So she beats Charlotte. She beats Becky Lynch. And it makes sense for the Becky Lynch match to be the number one contenders match because Becky was the last real challenger to Sasha at the previous TakeOver special. So that made sense. And so she beats Charlotte. She beats Becky. And then ultimately built her up to Sasha. So on one side, you have this really strong heel champion, and you have this plucky underdog babyface that has recently gotten some big wins under her belt. So everything mattered. All the matches leading up to it mattered. And even Sasha, because Sasha had a lot of squash matches on TV. And that only served to make her look more dominant. So even those matches mattered in the build-up to this particular match. And it all clicked. It all was wonderful. And then when you get to the match, everything delivered. The crowd you already had the investment of the fans. And then the two performers went out there and tore the house down and put on a match that quite honestly had me on the verge of tears. Because I was so emotionally invested in what I was seeing. And I wanted Bayley to win so badly. And there were points in that match where I thought, oh my God, she might not win. And it would have been absolutely heartbreaking if she didn't. And she did win, and it was awesome, and I loved it. And it made me so happy. So on NXT, the main difference is between that and the main show is that, yeah, you have the talented girls, and you're developing these talents really, really well. And you're putting these girls in the right spot to deliver. And that's all great and good. But you're also giving them the platform and the story and the context to have matches that matter at these TakeOver specials. It isn't just, oh, go out there and wrestle for 15 minutes and figure it out, and it'll be great. No, they're giving context, meaning, purpose, story, beginning, middle, and end, payoff, satisfaction. They're doing all of those things, and that's why the NXT Divas division is so much better than what you're seeing on the main show, and why simply adding the NXT girls to the main roster doesn't instantly fix everything. The main roster, like I said, the Divas Revolution, there's no story there. It's just it's just an endless cycle of matches, and they really need to fix that if they want this Divas Revolution to ultimately pay off and make women's wrestling in the WWE relevant as a whole. And again, I could take this all the way back to when they first brought Paige onto the show. It's like, oh, this girl from NXT that has a lot of buzz, and oh man, you put her on the main show, it'll be great. And she didn't really click right away. And because I didn't watch her early NXT stuff, and I watched her on the main show, and I'm like, I'm not seeing what the big deal is. And really what it amounted to is that they didn't give her anything to work with. She won her belt on the first night before anybody really knew who she was, and in the weeks that followed, they didn't do a good enough job of telling us who she was. So it's just kind of like, okay, what? Just shrug your shoulders and go, what is this? I don't know. And they kind of did the same thing here, and that's certainly problematic. And again, the Miz TV segment that they did made. That didn't do them any favors. I feel like Charlotte and Becky come across better in pre-tapes anyway. But, it's a lot of the problems with the Divas Revolution right now and why the crowd reactions have been less and less positive as the weeks have gone on are because there's just no reason to really care or invest. And they need to give the fans a reason to care or invest, or else it's just not going to work. And right now it's not working. But hopefully they can turn it around and get it to work. Again, NXT is a nice blueprint to look at. I'm just saying. There's more to NXT than just having the talents and the longer matches. You've got NXT does a much better job of making those matches matter, and that's really what makes it all work. But that said, that is all I have for now. I've gone long enough on this one. My next video will be the top 10 matches for the month of August and my favorite wrestling brand for the month of August, so be on the lookout for that. But until then, hope you all had a good weekend, and I will see you all later.